Welcome to the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We discuss 5 questions in about 15 minutes. And I'm very excited to welcome our guest today. This is Manik Suri. He is the founder and CEO of Therma out of San Francisco, California. Manik, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join me today. What would you like the audience to know about Therma?
Great to be here, Sean. Thanks for having me. I like to say that my job is to make cooling cool. We're trying to reduce the emissions caused by cooling or refrigeration, HVAC, air conditioning, and we're focused on cleaning up this space. And ironically, the warmer the planet gets, the more cooling is needed. But cooling is a big driver of emissions, and so there's this kind of vicious negative feedback loop. So I guess if there's one message I'd leave folks with, it's that pay attention to cooling. It's more important than you think, and we're going to need more of it in a warming planet.
Boy, that's a great, I don't think I've heard of anybody doing this or something even like this. So I think that's a great initiative. So I wish you all the success in that, because that's a very important endeavor that you're undertaking. So that's fantastic.
Appreciate it.
Oh, you're more than welcome. All right, well, let's jump to the questions here. Question number 1, Manik, as you've been building your business, is there a challenge that you're especially proud of that you overcame?
Yeah, many things came up along the way, still coming up along the way. We're still early stage, but I guess one of the biggest moments early on, we were raising capital, right before COVID-19 started, kind of early 2020. We had a round lined up, we had a term sheet, and we were looking, really, like things were good to go. This is February of 2020. And I was a former investor. I'd worked in private equity before, had a lot of friends in the VC and PE world. And, then the world shut down in early March, and suddenly everyone, was really, spooked and worse. And I think that was a moment where we really had to go inward and check in with ourselves. Do we really want to keep going? Because we almost ran out of money. We were down to less than 4 weeks of runway. The term sheet we had in February went away. We were selling a new product called Therma to the food industry, restaurants and hospitality, and every single potential customer was shut indefinitely. So you can imagine, not an easy time to raise capital or to convince people that this was a good idea. But we decided to keep going, and we grown since, multiple times, raised a fair bit of capital, and are now in thousands of locations. So that moment, I think, was really a pivotal one. It was should we do this, or is it time to throw in the towel?
A little bit of a gut check for you right at that moment. It wasn't for a lot of people at that time, but
a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
Well, and especially right at that pivotal moment when you've got funding lined up, but then it goes away. What do you do? And that was, I think that's a great recovery there you did. So congratulations on surviving that hurdle. That's a big one.
Thank you. Yeah, I think for everybody, that was not a year anyone wants to recreate.
No, once in a lifetime is plenty. So let's leave it
exactly.
At that, right?
Yep. Couldn't agree more.
Question number 2, how can leaders foster creativity in their teams?
I think there's a lot of ways to bring innovation and creativity to the fore. One thing that we've seen and I've found to be really effective is to create space, physical and psychological, for new ideas to be kicked around and to be brought up. And it can be as simple as, I want, I wish. There's a kind of a toolkit that we use, which is every quarter we'll do a simple Google document, little shared doc. You can have a section that's I like, a section that's I want, and a section that's I wish, and everyone in the team gets to answer with whatever they want to answer, and it can be anonymous, or you can put your name to your answers. And so the I likes are usually the kind of the things that are going well with the team, the company, the culture. The I want and the I wish, though, are really interesting, because you get a lot of data points and some really interesting ideas come out of that type of exercise, whether it's how to change how company operations run, or things we could do to communicate better, or product ideas, or new ways of thinking about the customer. Just really interesting things have come out of that exercise as one example. But I think it's a reflection of, this wasn't my idea. This was a new team member who joined us a little over a year ago. he had done this in his last company and had brought it over from a few companies. And this kind of simple exercise takes 15 minutes. Everyone stops what they're doing and does this once a quarter for 15 minutes. You kind of get that time. That just forces a certain bit of amount of collaboration
Oh, that's
into
a
the form.
great idea. That's a great idea. I have to ask a question because if I don't, I'm gonna regret it. But how do you distinguish between the I want and the I wish? What's the difference?
Yeah, well, I think the I want tends to be more concrete and personal, and tends to be a little bit more in the genre of I want more resources for the following, or I want visibility into, the forecast for budget for this quarter. The I wish tends to be a little more open ended, and we do have a talk over before we do this exercise. We talk about what kinds of things and give examples for each. The I wish is often more open ended and can be really a white space where people come up with their best and most creative ideas, and it can be anything under the sun. I wish we had a tool to measure the carbon emissions of every flight we took, or I wish we had a way to measure how often our customers logged in, on nights and weekends to see whether the system was adding, alarm, and off hours, et cetera. So it's a little more open ended and not specific to your department or your role.
Just a general wish list. I like that.
Yeah.
So for you folks, the way you do it in Therma is the way that you create that space, both physically and psychologically, for creation, is that spreadsheet where you've got the 3 columns. So I think that's a fantastic idea. I love that, and I hope everybody that's listening or watching will adopt some kind of a method to create that space. I think that's a fantastic idea. All right, well that's going to lead very nicely, I think, into this third question. Then, how can leaders help team members kind of develop trust between each other?
Yeah, it's a really, really hard thing to build. I think trust in any, organization or community is a hard thing. The the things that we've seen and I've seen personally really resonate. One, which I'm really working on myself, is this idea of honesty, and I think there's a phrase in a book, radical candor. The idea that one can share one's views and feedback in ways that are both, direct and empathetic. So you don't have to shield people from things, or hide your views, or unnecessarily undershare or avoid giving the feedback because you're worried about how it'll impact the other, or because you're worried about not being seen a certain way. That's super hard to do. It's super hard to do. But I think that the more we can encourage radical candor amongst our own team members, and as a manager, but also as a colleague, I think being more direct, but in a kind of empathetic way, that's the radical candor, leads to more trust over time. And people really have a sense of where they sit with you, where you sit relative to them. Then I think there's opportunity for shared understanding. Otherwise, it's a lot of posturing and a lot of I guess uncertainty and anxiety and insecurity that comes up because you don't really know where you sit or where the other person's views are, and that creates more issues. I say all that as if it were easy to do, but certainly been working on it and trying to do that, both with our team and in other organizational settings.
I think it's a great format. This idea of radical candor, because that's the hard part. You get over that initial hurdle of having to kind of maybe sometimes get negative feedback or input from somebody else, but it does engender trust over time. So I think that's a great comment. All right, question number 4. Is there an example of sometimes maybe we perceive things as a failure, but it actually turns out as a win? Do you have an example from your experience that would kind of demonstrate that?
So many, so many.
Hard to narrow it down.
Exactly. I think Therma as a company came out of what I thought at the time was a huge failure. Before Therma, I had started a company called Collaborative Inspect, or Co-Inspect, and that business was something I really believed in. It was really focused on improving safety and sustainability in the food industry, farm to fork. trying to reduce food waste, trying to reduce issues around food safety. The way we solved the problem turned out to be not the best way. We were using a mobile app to replace pen and paper, but we were making the work harder for users and for organizations. So just a really hard thing to do when you create work when there wasn't work, even if it's good for society, even if it's good for consumers and public health. Um, so we ultimately started working on a second product, a better way of solving the problem using sensors and automation and taking that work off of people's plates. And that's how Therma was born. Therma is short for temperature, humidity, energy, remote monitoring application.
Oh, wow.
And
I didn't
team of
realize it was
nerds,
an acronym.
it's an acronym. And when co-inspect wasn't working out after 3 years, I think I'd hit 40 states, raised a few million of early stage capital. We had a few thousand locations using the system. And we almost shut the company down. As I was saying earlier, we had this new product. We were going to raise capital for it. And in early 2020, when the term sheet and the capital dried up, we thought, okay, we're done. And this idea, isn't going to go anywhere. And so I really thought that co-inspect and all the work we'd put into it was a failure. When Therma started to take off in 2020, it was because of the pandemic, because of COVID-19. There was actually a lot of interest in remote monitoring, and a lot of locations were shut and people couldn't check what was going on because of staffing issues. So they wanted remote monitoring. And it turned out that all of the customers that we picked up at co-inspect, most of them ended up moving over to Therma. So Therma got this really nice uptick early on. And many of the things that I learned from working with food businesses and hospitality organizations ended up being really valuable. So Therma grew 3x year over year in 2021 and 22. Now we're 75 people and have raised 30 million of capital. But if we hadn't failed with co-inspect, we would never have figured out the things that we needed to do and the ways in which the workflow needed to be improved to actually build a sensor and create an automated way of solving for it. So Therma would never have, the idea would never have come across my mind, at least, if not for going through the headache and the heartache of those years with co-inspect. And so I looked at it at the time as a huge personal failure. And now I see it more as, just part of the learning and the part of the foundation for the early success.
I love that story, Manik, because it demonstrates so well that we sometimes reach a point where we think, oh, all of this work, all this effort, it's for nothing. I failed, it's over, it's done. That's the end of the story, end of the chapter, end of the book. But we don't realize sometimes that there's some other opportunities right around the corner that we just kind of have to adjust. Some people use the word pivot. That's not my favorite word, but nonetheless, that's what it is. It's a little bit of an adjustment, a little bit of a tweak, and that supposed failure idea becomes a fantastic idea. And I love that you saw that opportunity, didn't give up, had some resilience there to kind of bounce back. I think that's a great story, great example, great example. All right, our last question, and this is one of my favorite questions here. Tell us a little bit about your first job.
First job, well, how far back? My first job was in the mailroom in my dad's medical office as a kid. So I was, a teenager, and summer holiday money didn't come easy. My parents were immigrants and kind of self-made people who were doctors, but started their own practices in a small town in California. So they made sure that my brother and I got plenty of experience working at the mailroom and doing posting. We used to lick the stamps and write the names on the envelopes. That was our job. My first real job was after Harvard undergrad in Cambridge. I did a master's in Cambridge, England. Was at a big hedge fund called D.E. Shaw, where I worked for the gentleman who ran the firm and did growth private equity from kind of 06 to 9, focused on India and China. I lived in New York and then in Hong Kong, Shanghai, and Delhi for a few years, doing investing in emerging markets. Super fun, learned a ton, got paid well, and I got to see what it was like to be an investor in kind of emerging markets. So that was a real challenge, and I had a lot of autonomy in the job, but and a great firm. Just D.E. Shaw is a really great, in my experience, investment shop. But
great.
Yeah.
I like your story about having to lick stamps. I don't know that that's something that the younger kids today would appreciate. Is that there was a day when you had to lick the stamps, not don't have the self
Exactly.
Yeah, so that's a task right there, just to lick stamps. So,
It was, and we had the little bowl, to kind of stay hydrated next to
yeah,
us.
yeah. I remember. Well, Monik, this has been great. Thank you so much for taking time to be on the podcast today. How can people find you?
Thanks so much for having me, Sean. My email and my social, kind of accounts, try and keep them simple. It's Manik, Manik, at hellotherma.com. It's Manik at hellotherma.com. We're hiring and we're always looking for new team members and partners. I'm on Twitter. That's Manik V Suri, and LinkedIn. And we're Therma. The handle is Hello Therma. Check us out, hellotherma.com. Great to be here. Thanks so much for listening.
Great. Thank you, Monik. This is Sean Richards with the Team Engagement Podcast, where leaders of teams share their insights. We invite you to subscribe to the podcast, either the video version or the audio version, or wherever you may be watching or listening. We also invite you to go to teamengagementpodcast.com for more ideas. This is Sean Richards once again signing off, saying, have humility to learn and then courage to act on what you've learned. Thanks so much for joining us. Have a great day.